Good morning. Welcome to EPG Pathshala on the major subject Social Medicine and Community Health. Today I'm going to be discussing National Housing and Habitat Policy 1998 under the National Health Programs and Policy. The development team headed by Professor C.P. Mishra from IMS BHU and the paper has been coordinated by Dr. Taneja from Delhi, Dr. Ramesh Masti from Bangalore, and from Professor Banerjee from New Delhi. Now, what are the learning objectives of this particular national program? Before discussing, we should know under what headings we are going to talk. That is, role of the stakeholders. That means, who are the stakeholders who are actually involved in building up this particular project and seeing to the requirements and to the ultimate presentation of the houses to those who require the houses, either at the urban or the rural areas. Then, of course, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation. And the most important objective is to know that we want housing for all by 2022. With increasing I think we should, after the introduction of the problem statement, we should all know what are the role of the stakeholders of the central. Now, who are the stakeholders? See, because housing is such a topic or is such a problem on a national scale that it is required by every single individual belonging to the country. He has to live somewhere. So in this, and it is not as if that you just buy the land and make the houses or make a house wherever you want it. For example, we see the slum areas which have been coming up outside the metro cities. And of course, we know the biggest example is outside Bombay. The central government, state government, local authorities, the public and private housing finance companies, housing boards and development authorities, and other public agencies. And of course, if you take the PPP program, the corporate and the private sector also have to come in. And apart from that, what is most necessary, with the ongoing environmental changes, we have the tsunami or we have the earthquakes, we have the floods, and so therefore, continuous research and technology is essential in order to improve the housing quality in the different parts of the country. And the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation has the ongoing schemes has ongoing schemes to see to the housing supply. Then the public sector undertakings, autonomous bodies, they're all coming in. And with it, we have to finally knit a pattern as to where the program begins and how comfortably and safely we can deliver the houses in its present state at the required levels. Now, when you want to define, yes, a WHO expert group has defined residential environment, that is housing, as a physical structure which man uses and the environments of the structure, including all the necessary services, facilities, equipment, and devices needed or desired for the physical, mental health, and the social well-being of the family and individual. Before going into this very detailed description and a definition, let us just remember a few words. A house is a place where a man lives with his family, or which is occupied by a family consisting of the head of the family, his partner, and his children, and even maybe his old parents. As per the definition of the WHO expert group, which has defined, as I said already, residential environment as a physical structure. But when we talk about housing and habitat, it is more than a house, and its environment is definitely more than what a physical structure means. It has a profound impact on the family, on the human health, and on the people who are living within it. Because in a house, there is an intercurrent of emotions which are both physical and mental, social, so that the home remains a major cause for not only ill health, but it may become a major cause for happiness if the environment is right and through exposure to many factors, which include all the above factors which we have named: home injuries, chemical substances. There could be influence of home injuries, chemical substances, mold and damp, noise, pests are there, infestations, poor access to water, sanitation, proximity to pollution sources, flooding, and inadequate protection from extreme weather. Now, this is exactly what we are facing today because of an incomplete housing program, wherein the houses actually are just walls which are standing up. In fact, in some places, like I said, there are just walls which are standing up which have, in fact, windows with no protection whatsoever from the extreme weather or from the outside pollution. And as such, what can be the extreme impact of all this housing, of bad housing, on the health of the people? The promotion and protection of public health therefore becomes an important part through housing and construction, and it measures actually the increased well-being. If it is done in a proper manner, it measures the increased well-being and the reduced suffering and the lower health care which are normally being provided for, and which should definitely be improved. Now, apart from the food and clothing, shelter is a basic human right. The housing situation, and particularly the housing shortage in India, has been a matter of great concern for the decision makers as well as common populace for quite some time. One thing I must say that apart from food and clothing, shelter is a human right. But if you look into the history of housing, rather shelter, right from immemorial times, we know that our ancient people who lived in the villages or in the mountains had just merely caves as shelter bases, or those who have lived in the jungles have lived under the trees, protected by just nature. And today, we are not very far off if we provide bad shelter or bad housing. This is not very different from the ancient times. Therefore, shelter, housing, its surroundings, its inner factors must are of particular importance to the housing, to the condition of the citizen today. So, shelter, although it is a basic human right, but becomes the definitive right of a country to provide that shelter in a very effective manner. The housing situation, and particularly the housing shortage in India, has definitely been of concern from right from the center to the district level, in fact. The problem of housing shortage, and of course, it must not be forgotten that with the huge population explosion which is occurring today, definitely we are falling short of housing and of the other facilities, normal facilities, which are important for the common man in his day-to-day living. So therefore, it is not only housing, but it is water, it is roads, it is food, it is atmosphere, protection, civil rights. Everything comes into his purview. By 1997, the total housing shortages. Now, therefore, considering the problem that housing was becoming shortage for our nation, the ministry, right from the ministry down to the state level, down to the district level, they all, because this was a big problem which was coming up, so therefore they started measuring actually what the shortage was. And it was estimated to be about 13.66 million units which we lacked, out of which approximately 7.6 million units would be in the urban areas. And more than 90% of this shortage would be for the poor and the low income category. It is estimated that an investment of rupees 1,51,000 crores would be required to bridge this deficit, but not more than 25% of this would flow from banks, financial institutions, central and state governments. So, where would the rest come from? From from the individual concerned, or that we'll have to study further. And again, it was estimated that a further nearly double this amount, 2,50,000 crores, would be required for the urban infrastructure during the ninth plan. And again, but not more than 10% would be coming from the government sources. And therefore, because of this big deficit, we have not been able to make any significant headway, and we cannot do it without massive participation of the private sector. This call for the creation of enabling environment by way of legal and regulatory reforms, and we have to encourage non-government sectors to take up this land, assembly, housing, these problems. Now, like I said, that I have been mentioning that it is through the government and through the state and through the district authorities that we can hope for land allocation, money and the budget allocation for the necessary implementation of the housing structure. Then only maybe if the national agenda declares a housing for all as a priority area, we should be able to achieve somewhere near that target, with the construction of 2 million houses every year would be required, with of course emphasis on the poor and the deprived, out of which a small 0.7 million houses would be constructed in the urban areas. And with this background, the new National Housing and Habitat Policy, formerly known as the NHHP, was formulated in 1998, and it was laid before the Parliament on the 29th of the 7th month in 1998. Now, the report of this, as a result, a report came in from the Technical Group on Housing Urban Shortage, and it was found that our state, Uttar Pradesh, has the highest shortage factors, whereas some of the smaller states, that they come in between, of course. And smaller states in the northeastern areas or in the more developed areas are showing a lesser, smaller amount of deficit. For example, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, and Tripura. These are the small hilly areas in the northeast which require a little bit of input for achieving this particular object. Now, most important is creation of surpluses in housing stock. This is the policy which was then accepted, started underlining very important factors. For example, creation of surplus in housing stock either on a rental or an ownership basis. Then providing quality and cost-effective shelter options, especially to the vulnerable groups. Ensuring that housing along with the supporting services is treated as a priority and at par with the infrastructure sector. Infrastructure sector means the roads, the water, the other facilities which are coming up in order to support the housing and the habitat policy. And most important, removing as much legal and financial and administrative barriers so that the objective is received in a very comfortable time. The housing and habitat policy again aims at, we talked about getting the private and the public cooperation and the cooperative sectors in order to participate in this national government program. Therefore, this policy would be able to forge a strong partnership between this and thus bring in the new title of PPP as far as housing is concerned. Most important again, when we are constructing houses, since these would more normally grow up in height rather than grow on the land, so that more houses could be accommodated, technology becomes very important. Technology for modernizing the housing sector so that we increase efficiency, productivity, energy efficiency, and the quality besides, of course, the most important factor, quantity. Then, as we go to the rural areas, we empower the Panchayati Raj institutions and the village cooperatives to mobilize credit for their people so that some money could be coming from the individual himself who would be the last and the grounded stakeholder as far as housing is concerned. Now, this policy 1998 also laid down the role of all the stakeholders. Stakeholder meaning those people who are directly or indirectly concerned with bringing up this policy and seeing it to its successful fruition. The central government, of course, would take the legal reforms would come from their economic policies, the government allocation of the money, and they would float funds in order to develop a debt market for housing infrastructure so that if people would invest in it, the money would come, then that money could be easily diverted to this particular policy wherein the housing would be more comfortable. And we would set up a national shelter fund to meet the requirement of low cost funds and the housing needs of the poor. And most important, let's not forget that when we are building up any program, it becomes our dire duty to promote research and development, and therefore the results which come out, we transfer the technology into actual construction of houses. Evolve parameters for optimal use of available resources to promote development and growth in a sustained manner. Most important, we provide fiscal concessions for housing, infrastructure, innovative and energy-saving construction materials, methods, and also set a regulatory mechanism to ensure that the concessions are correctly targeted and utilized. I feel that there is another important point which has to come in, and that is the time management as far as the creation and building up of these houses is concerned. Within the required time, we fulfill this task, it would be important that all these stakeholders would get together to fulfill this target and hand it over to the householders at the earliest. The state government, coming back down from the center to the state government, they see because the legal procedures of housing construction would fall under the purview of the state government. Therefore, they should actually slightly loosen up the legal and the regulatory regime to give a boost to the housing and supporting infrastructure, besides, of course, promoting again the private sectors and the cooperatives at the state level for helping out, and undertake most important how to acquire land. So therefore, necessary attention would have to be given for acquiring land in a comfortable manner without too many hassles. Facilitate training. Oh, this is a very important point which is coming up and which I must share with all of you. That is, they are also considering facilitating training of construction workers by converging other development programs through the building centers and the other agencies. See, normally when a construction site comes up, non-trained laborers just come, register themselves, and the work starts. And without taking undue care for the safety of the workers, for the staying at the local site, for constructing their own small houses, temporary hutments. So all these matters have to be taken up and seen to, so that even these workers are given the necessary backup in terms of maybe medical aid, in terms of food, in terms of care, in terms of shelter, so that the necessary work of the government and the district would go up very comfortably. Then coming down to the local authorities, they would identify the housing shortages and they would prepare the district. See, because it is the local authorities who would know where and how to acquire the land, and so that which could be given for the necessary construction. They would devise programs to meet the housing shortage and augment supply of land for housing, particularly for the vulnerable group. and it is they, along with the district authorities, which would plan an extensive expansion, but sensible expansion of both urban and rural infrastructure services. Now, coming to the third of the stakeholders, which I feel is a very important addition, because apart from the government and the stakeholders, the third hand or the third arm would be the public and the private housing financing companies, which would redefine their role, move away from the traditional approach to housing finance, because it is through them that they would develop and expand their reach to meet the needs of the people, devise schemes to lend at affordable rates to those who are in dire need of housing finance support, and most important, mobilize resources from the mutual funds, from the insurance funds for the house building activities. And it is here that in the funds which are coming out, one of the most important funds which has come out is a gold loan. And people are advised, instead of keeping their gold, to to set it up and take a loan on that, which they could redefine their work and take it back. That money would come in useful for their personal needs as well as for their important life needs. And another stakeholder are the housing boards, corporate and development authorities, and the public agencies, which would again have to move away, revamp their methods. In fact, revamping their methods from 1998 has to come right from the top sector of government, state, private sectors, and the housing boards at the local authorities, so that they could hasten up this process and lessen the period wherein from the start to the actual entry into the house of the householder. Then they would move away from direct construction and instead forge partnerships with private. So they would all now start join hands and start working with the private sector as well as the cooperatives for housing construction in an efficient manner. And they would also devise flexible schemes to meet the necessary requirement at the earliest. Along with this, they would many other public sectors or the state sectors would come in. For example, the banks would start playing a very important role as far as loans are concerned too. And in these times, it has also been seen that house loans, vehicle loans, they have all become very easy, and the candidate finds it very easy to bring out these loans. So, therefore, this would be an additional important landmark as far as housing, devising schemes for quick housing would be concerned. Now, the corporate and the private public sectors, which we have been continuously mentioning, they could take a lead role in land assembly, which of course the local government would be doing also in land assembly, construction of houses, development of amenities, because you see, all of them would have a say in how the houses would be constructed, where the houses would be constructed, the number of houses, and the eventual transfer of these houses to the owners. And along with all this, hand in hand would go the research and the technology transfer organizations would direct research to efforts locally raw materials. Now we are seeing that in fact brick making has become an art, and a lot of developments have taken as far as brick making and the cementing of the walls has taken place. In fact, the door replacements, the window replacements, previously they used to use very expensive wood. Now that is neither possible nor affordable. So therefore, the current materials which would be used would be healthy to the person concerned, would be easily available, and would be at affordable prices, and most important, for its strength and durability. Then they could reduce the use of scarce natural resources and replace them with renewable sources, and standardize the new technology for easy adoption by various public and private construction agencies, promote energy efficiency in building materials and construction methods. Now, a word about this energy efficiency. Like I mentioned, the brick making or the cement which is being used or the window materials, these are these have all become energy efficient, lighter materials, more affordable materials, and most important, they are said to actually breathe, so that the house breathes in the freshness from the outside and gives health and prosperity to the family living within it. Then they promote use of renewable energy sources. For example, now solar energy has come in. And for those people who are wanting this, in fact, they are getting at discounted prices how to use the solar panels for their housing, so that there is a continuous supply of good hot water in the house or the heat for in the winter months. Then, very important, we have to promote the disaster mitigation techniques for the new constructions, because wherever constructions are occurring, we have to see to the natural disasters which may or which would have it, or the areas which have a history of such disasters. For example, earthquakes. Recently, of recent times, we have had a lot of earthquake problem in the country, and vibrations have been felt all through different areas, particularly the northern areas. So, as such, and then the cyclone areas, particularly Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, those who are on the seaside. So, we have to be careful. And then again, let us not forget the annual flooding which takes place alongside the big rivers. For example, the Brahmaputra or the Ganges or the other fast rivers which are flowing. So, as such, these areas have to be particularly strengthened as far as safety of these housing and of the people are concerned. Now, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, very important. This was created with a vision of equitable, inclusive, sustainable, civic sensitive growth of towns and cities free from slums, which provide adequate and affordable housing with means of productive employment with dignity, and give a decent quality of life to all the inhabitants, including the poor. This vision and this definition is a very good definition, because it includes actually what is our lifestyle. We should have equal opportunities, we should include all these factors, and most important, like any other national program which we talk of, it should be a sustainable one. Direct research efforts are naturally being put into to make the locally available raw materials. Then, as we have already mentioned, if natural resources are becoming scarce, now for example, coal is becoming scarce. Therefore, coal has to be replaced with some other affordable material on which they must be researching. And we standardize the new technology for easy adoption by all the public and the private sectors and the government sectors concerned, so that good construction could go on with keeping total safety in view. Now, when we talk of housing, we talk of urban poverty alleviation, several programs have been instituted by our country from time to time. And just let me quickly go through all these for your study. One was the Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, Rajiv Awas Yojana, wherein during his time it was said that they would provide shelter to as many homeless people as possible. Then the credit risk guarantee fund came in, and the Rajiv Rin Yojana, the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, and In the public sector undertakings and autonomous bodies, we have had several inputs from very important agencies, that is the Housing and Urban Development Corporation, HUDCO. Now, one thing I would like to share is HUDCO not only gives for safe development for housing, but it has already played an important part in the private undertaking for instituting the beginning of medical colleges, and that too mostly in the northeast sector areas. Then the Hindustan Prefab Limited. Now these are concerned with the prefabrication of windows, doors, etc., which could be used at affordable prices in the housing structure. Building Materials Technology Promotion Council, very important, because all these are concerned somehow with bringing the cost of eventual cost of construction down to a level which would be affordable at all levels, not only the government but the district, local, and most important, the individual who is putting his little bit of share in to take his final house for living comfortably. Then the National Housing Policy in 2007 also was brought in, and basically all of them have tried to delve into the problems of construction, meeting the requirements, and eventually giving a safe habitat for those who require, both in the urban and in the rural areas. Apart from this, legislations have come in, and legislations have come in so that it makes the life and the livelihood of these people, particularly the underdeveloped people, the sector or the poor sector, so that they could live within their means and as well have a good livelihood. Then international collaborations, the United Nations Habitat has come in, and Asia Pacific, then India, Brazil, South America, all of them have put in their bit. Commonwealth local government forums have also come in. Then this is one chart which just shows the administrative setup, that is wherein in this Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, you have, which is totally headed by a minister. He is helped by his secretaries of the various divisions. They come in housing and construction and economic planning, and they in turn are helped by their junior officers. Uh, so eventually, what do we want? We want housing for all by 2022. With the growth, and this housing for all by 2022 takes into consideration the rising price, the rising costs of land, the rising costs of materials, and it has to control the rising population, wherein the slum population is also expected to go up to 1.8 crores in 2021, 0.2 crores more non-slum poor, and actual demand would actually depend on the demand survey and the estimated factors for um, the time by 2022, what would the population require, and in what proportions would it be for urban as well as slum as well as the rural communities. And it is said that maybe 2 crore houses would require rupees 12 lakhs crores, that is at rupees 6 lakhs per house. Resources required are substantial in terms of land, finances, and other capabilities, but it is definitely imperative to mobilize all the stakeholders right from the top down the line of central government, state government, and the private sectors, banks, and the industries to help and to see that the land is used as a land is used in fact properly, and the need to remove the supply side constraints is very important. Imperative to use innovative and sustainable technology and material in construction. Now, in the present scenario, everybody, it is well known that housing crisis is definitely huge and there is a definite shortage as far as housing is concerned. We see all over the country, in fact, all over the country, multiple tall housing schemes coming up, and it must be kept in mind that, and often we do hear of collapses and disasters which are occurring. So, therefore, it is very imperative that, in spite of this huge crisis which is coming up, and that we have to make these houses, safety is of utmost importance, and as well as the use of latest technology to be applied to make the housing affordable, to make the housing comfortable, and also we should not forget there are a group of people with disabilities, and these housing structure should be compatible with looking after these people also. The categories would be economically weaker section, then you have the low income group and the middle income group and above. So with this, I thank you for visiting this EPT Pathshala.